So my name is Brian Cox. I'm the Executive Officer of the Bioenergy Association, and Bioenergy Association is anyone who is interested in progressing solid, liquid, or gaseous biofuels in New Zealand. We do actually cover Australia and New Zealand, and South Pacific is the area, because in this sector, many of the people cover that wide range. So we focus on New Zealand, and we're based here, but we do have an interest in what's happening in the whole of Australasia. The sector is split into quite three parts, which are each quite separately focused, because the people who are interested in a gaseous biofuel are often quite different than the people who are interested in a combustion or from a liquid biofuels. So we split into three streams, and each one of those has its own work program and operates like a mini association. But there's so much overlap, because what we're talking about is recycling biomass from wood or organic wastes, the residues from that, to make a biofuel of some form, and then to be able to use that. So the aspect of working across the sector, whether a material is made into a gaseous or a liquid biofuel, is dependent very much on the people involved and what the application is. So we treat the three as equal. The media tends to talk about biofuel as the liquid one, as though that's the only biofuel, but in fact that is the least active part of New Zealand, where focus is more on solid and gaseous. So in terms of where things are, is that the Bioenergy Association itself has been going for 23 years. And it's fair to say that in the first 22 years, that there wasn't a lot of progress, there wasn't a lot of interest from government. Coal and fossil fuels were dominant and were a lot cheaper than anything else. And so there was a limited action. In the last year, there's been a complete change in demand, supply, interest. Everything has changed. And basically, so I say to people that if what they are thinking about is more than 9 months old, they should treat it as history. It is may or may not be still relevant, but generally it will not be relevant, because in the last 9 months, things have changed completely. So government has been leading this with the climate change initiatives, but also the businesses who are responding to the cost of fossil fuels and also its availability, particularly in the case of gas, are now searching out a whole lot of new things. So the opportunities for what you're looking at are right in the forefront of what's happening in many other applications. So it's new to many people. Not a lot has been done in some areas. The solid biofuels replacing coal with wood fuel is pretty well established. Now that's the market for that is operating for 12 years, and so that's pretty good. The gaseous one is just getting off underway. The first big commercial gas from waste plant was commissioned 2 weeks ago, and in the liquid biofuels, there we've tended to go backwards or stagnate for the last few years, and we're still doing that. And in fact, yesterday the government said they're going to put everything back a year. So the avenue there is, in some of these areas, if you can't find information or you can't find someone, it's maybe not that you are missing something, it probably doesn't exist, and that it's new. So finding advisors, finding consultants, finding people who can answer your questions is a difficult task. So that's going in terms of the type of things that you're looking at, or they are for even big commercial plant. So we're in that phase. We've gone from emerging to probably just emerging plus at the moment. So some of the areas and opportunities for yourselves in terms of heritage engines is replacing particularly coal or diesel, is that there are opportunities available today, and there are a number that you could pick up and do, but you may have to do a bit of homework yourself, or do a bit of, you're not going to be able to find off the shelf answers to what you're talking about. And and that's just the reality of where we are. So when we look at diesel for engines, is that you've got two primary sources of diesel. You've got a biodiesel, which is similar to mineral diesel, but it's an ester, and it is produced from vegetable and cooking oils by the addition of methanol. And so that is can be used in an engine 100%, but often is not, mainly because of the warranties from the engine manufacturers. So if it's a new vehicle under warranty, is that you probably wouldn't be using 100%. But when you're looking at something that's probably 100 years old, then the issue is you're not worrying about the warranties, and so that is quite a viable and safe approach. Renewable diesel, which is exactly the same molecular as mineral diesel, is made quite differently, and that is 100% drop-in fuel. So you could drop that into an existing tank of mineral, and there would be no difference. The engines would never know that there was anything different. Whereas if you put in biodiesel, the blending of that, you would start with a maybe 20% blend, and then increase it, getting experience of what's happening in the engine. You wouldn't go to 100% probably on day one. But there is no reason why you couldn't make your own biodiesel. In Kaitaia, for a number of years, the community trust up there made its own biodiesel. It was for its own trucks. They picked up and used all the fish and chip oil, and of course in Northland there's a lot of fish and chip oil, and made their own biodiesel. I've seen plumbers who make biodiesel for their own utes and use it. So the avenue is that is something that every one of us could do without much difficulty, and doesn't require a lot of science. And basically you're mixing just the methanol in with an oil. The work that people like Z Energy have been doing, they've been looking at tallow and making it from tallow. Tallow is pretty expensive stuff. Fish and chip oils is often a recyclable material, so a lot cheaper. But that's, so any of your diesels engines, in my view, they could be running on a biodiesel made by yourselves or someone else nearby, using your own local feedstocks, and that would be not cost prohibitive. It would be quite cheap, and certainly within your capability to do. Whereas renewable diesel is a lot harder to make, and generally you'll be looking to buy that. It's generally not available in New Zealand at the moment, and Z Energy has been working with manufacturers Neste to bring it in, but it's not here yet. So that's an easy one for diesels. When you come to the renewable diesel is often got other names as well. Most of these have got other names, so you need to just check. But common use is renewable diesel or biodiesel. In terms of replacement on coal, there is a number of biomass options there. The best option is not available. That is to put a biocoal in. And that's a coal that has been made, and it's similar to charcoal or activated carbon, and that is used as a fuel in steelworks, power stations, and things. But there's not a lot made in New Zealand. I've never, whether you look to activated carbon or some of those, I've got no experience in that. But we are looking at the moment in manufacturing biocoal. It's often called torrefied wood, or at Huntley at the moment, Genesis Energy is looking at steam exploded pellets, and they're all very similar to the, and that you could be used. If you look at the production of all of these biofuels that you could use, is that they are made by a combustion process, and depending on the degree of oxygen that's put into the process is what the product comes out. But some of those are, like charcoal, are a intermediate stage and can be used. So making a charcoal, which could be called a torrefied wood, is one step of the way. Put less oxygen in, and you would have a pyrolysis material, again combustible. You've also got and then on the area where you've got most oxygen is where you do combustion in a traditional boiler in a sense. So all of those are available, but probably a bit harder to come by. Whereas what we've been looking at in terms of some of these small applications, horticulture people who have got a coal boiler, small coal boiler, they're looking at making briquettes, and because the calorific value is lower for a wood biomass briquette than coal, is that they have been looking at lancing it with a oil, used oil, or in the south they were doing throwing lignite into it just to get the calorific value up. So it was a blend with a bit of, but that's well, yes, you can do it. But and that you're not going to a full decarbonisation as you would if you used a waste oil into making your briquettes to get the calorific value up, so as that it's very similar to nuggety coal. The other ones of using wood pellets, again, these can be done in Te Awamutu dairy factory recently. They converted the coal boiler there to using wood pellets, and it's been very successful. They had made very minor modifications because of the design of the boiler. But of course, with pellets, it's lower calorific value. You need a lot more, so you need to be able to have enough fuel to get the amount of energy out. Same if you use wooden blocks and offcuts, they can be used as a fuel direct. But basically you've got to throw 2 of those in for every bucket of coal that you would normally use. So there's a lot more effort into those sort of things. So the range of things are there they can have. In terms of staying, and what I've focused on is so that you keep the integrity of the heritage vehicle that you're talking about without modification. I mean, I've seen others where they electrify these and they do other things, hydrogen and all that, but you're losing the heritage importance of the vehicles if you do that. Whereas if you use some of these other things, you can do it and keep the heritage value. So I think that sort of covers overall.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Brian. And could you give us a bit of a sense of when the drop in renewable diesels and stuff like that will be coming online?
Well, it's a strange thing. I could have a renewable diesel here within 3 months. But if you take Kiwi Rail, is that I could get enough renewable diesel to fully have all of Kiwi Rail throughout the country on renewable diesel instead of mineral diesel within 3 months, because the existing infrastructure is the same, the engines are the same, no change needed there, storage is the same. You bring it in and you just use it as mineral oil. So that could be done within 3 months. But Z Energy, who are the ones who have signaled the most that they would bring it into the country, are a bit cautious at the moment because of the volatility of the international prices, and also what's happening in Europe with the energy scene, because a number of people are moving to using renewable fuels because natural gas is no longer, or is hard to come by, etc. So there's a lot. It's not the best time to be looking at these from a price and availability. But Nestle, who are based in Singapore, and in New Zealand, recently purchased enough renewable diesel to do their trials next year using renewable diesel, is that you can get that. Now, what I'm saying to people is that there's no pressure at the moment on Z Energy or anyone else to bring it in. So they're not going to do it. And the government itself yesterday put back the obligation that they were going to have as a policy, because there's not enough people like yourselves who are saying, hey, we want it. So it's got to be demand driven. And at the moment, I can't believe that heavy trucking firms are not saying we want it, because they would keep the existing trucks, the existing engines, and have no capital expenditure, and then putting pressure on government to maybe subsidise it so that it's cost effective. But the emissions reduction from having it now is so significant that I find it unbelievable that we are not following it. Now, I've tried to analyze why, and the issue is we have very few large companies who are active, and we've been captured by the electricity sector, or the minister has, and the policy people have been elected by it. So they're into hydrogen and electricity because they'll make more money out of those, because they all come from electricity. Whereas there's the aspect of importing some renewable diesel. There's no people seeing the profit that they could make from doing that, because we don't have them here. So my view is you should be putting pressure on your local MPs to get it in here. You should be saying, we need it, we want it. We can decarbonize our engines if we can get it.
That's really interesting. Thank you, Brian. Out of curiosity, if we're in a bit of a funny situation with availability and lobbying, all that type of thing, what guidance would you give to our railway groups and what they should be planning for as things change?
Look, we're happy to help you on that. We work across the sectors, a number of other organisations. I work a lot with horticultural organisations, and that because the horticulture sector are saying we can decarbonise horticulture if we have these availability of these fuels. And so they are starting a bit more pressure on that. So we're supporting them with information and assistance on that, and we can help you as well to make sure that your arguments are good and your facts are right. But it's got to come from people like yourselves who need it. It's got to come from truck companies. It's got to come from marine. Marine isn't a really low hanging fruit, because we could change the renewable diesel into many of our coastal shipping is a no-brainer. There was a biodiesel manufacturer in Christchurch, Biodiesel New Zealand, a few years ago, which was owned by Solid Energy. We were making a lot of biodiesel, and when the government removed the support for that, then that was sold to a fishing company in Littleton. They used it for the fishing fleet, and one of the reasons for why marine are very keen on it is because it's organic. If they do have a spill, then the fish just love it. It's great feed. and so it's not an environmental problem like mineral diesels, and so you don't have a number of issues. The aspect is that plant in Christchurch is now owned privately by Fulton Hogan, I think it is, and they're not interested in providing it to others. But if you buddies with Fulton Hogan and you're in the Christchurch area, knock on their door and say, hey, you still making it? If not, why not? And or can we do something to encourage you to do it? So I don't know. You never know what companies like Fulton Hogan might do. They've got the plant, they've got the capability, they know how to do it. Again, I've tried to find out what their interest is, and they really had no interest in it. I don't know don't even know why they had it. So you could create a need for it because you got a good need and you got a good news story for them.
Fantastic, thank you for that. I think we'll open it up to questions now. I've been sent through a few questions, but who else has a question to start us off?
I could ask one if I'm allowed. I understand that renewable diesel has a serious price premium at the moment over liquid mineral diesel.
Yeah.
Given that, is it any wonder that people don't want to buy it right now?
Well, I mean, that's correct. But what we find in these areas is that there's no even any discussion or people get to a statement like you said, and then they stop. And now the question that comes up to me is, and then, okay, why is it more expensive, and what can we do to get it so that it is cost effective? So if you come from a glass half empty, then you stop at that point. If you come from, we must be able to sort this out because it is high value, then there is an answer. And we see that in the whole of the bioenergy, biofuels sector, is that, for example, people say, oh, there's not enough biomass. And I say, well, you're looking out the window today of how much is there now. We're talking about a 30, 40, 50 year horizon. So we can plant a tree, and we can plant a tree a lot easier than build a new power station. So why are we not doing this? We've had this discussion with heat plant owners, people, food processors, and we've said to them, well, why don't you buy that paddock next door and put some your own trees in there and hedge your fuel supply. So it's about thinking so that how do we do it? You've got a need, you've got a demand, there's potential, but you have to say, well, go to it with a can-do approach and overcome that. Now, one of the aspects that I've been promoting because of that is government spends a lot of money, say, on hydrogen. A fraction of that to provide a subsidy for that gap would get renewable diesel in, and that would stop having to, the private sector, private owners have to replace their own vehicles at their cost to go to hydrogen or electricity. So when you look on a total national perspective and you look at who's carrying the cost, is in hydrogen and electricity, the vehicle owners are subsidizing the rest of the country in terms of climate change. So the avenue is, these discussions are all need to be had, and things are movable. Why has government stopped put back the obligation for biodiesel? Because they've got pressure from people that the cost of living is more serious than the climate change. Now, I'm not disputing whether that's true or not, but the issue is that they've gone to that lobby rather than to continue to put this. So the government's always weighing up those options, and they always go with the squeakiest wheel, or the one that's going to get the most votes next time. So the avenue is that, yes, that's a true fact, but it doesn't mean that you have to stop there.
Thank you for that, Murray. And thank you, Brian.
But the other thing, if I just follow that one, is that I personally would go for biodiesel anyway, because the type of engines we're talking about here, They're absolutely perfect for a biodiesel rather than a renewable diesel. So you can make renewable diesel at depending on your access to fish and jib oil and a bit of methanol. You can do that at as cheap as chips. So it's about looking to the right solution and finding the barrier. I'm just using what your comment was as a barrier because that's where we are, and that's a real situation. So okay, let's go around that and let's see what we can do with biodiesel. And the advantage about biodiesel is that each one of your clubs or whoever they are trusts, the ones who own their vehicles, you can do it yourself. So you don't have to have a national infrastructure. But what would be really good from a federation's point of view is helping them by giving guidance on how they could each do it. And so what I would be looking at is contacting the Kaitaia community trust up there and say, I understand you did this. Can you help us to do it? And we will develop a guide for all of our members, all our clubs or whoever it is, to be able to do that. And that was, I mean, this is what I have to do for the sector as it is. I use technical guides to help all of the multitude of different participants not have to reinvent the wheel because we do the guidance on behalf of them. And that's what I see, the national associations are for.
Louisa, you've got a question.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So if we're gonna use oil for biodiesel production, if we're using the residue oil, for example, for the fish and chips, how can we make sure that the quality of the oil is good enough and homogeneous enough for the transesterification process?
Look, I'm not technical enough to be able to go down to that level of detail. There are, we have people who have made it. It doesn't require a lot of science in this, but I know that it's been done. Like I use the example of Kaitaia because in the far north, they were able to do it. So if they can do it up there, then all the rest of us should be able to.
Interesting. Does someone else have a question?
Can I ask a question? One of the things about biofuel is that what are we going to make it out of? You say vegetable oil, and we talk about trees and things, because one of the downsides of biofuel is that it competes with food production. Is this sort of biodiesel that you're talking about, does that actually compete with food production?
Well, we're not competing with food production. There's no competition at all, because I mean that's a myth that's been spread around a lot. But if you look at what we're talking about residues that are otherwise waste, whether it's from trees or whether it's from cooking chips and fish and chips. So we're taking a material like fish and chip oil, which might otherwise go to landfill. It is collected and sent to Singapore, where it is reprocessed into renewable diesel over there. And it was made into biodiesel, but they don't make biodiesel now. They've now moved to making renewable diesel. So we're talking residues. We're talking about food plus. Now the same goes for trees. We're not talking about growing trees and cutting them down and using them for energy. We're talking about the residues that would get left on the ground. It's about picking them up, or it's about in the solid biofuels at the moment, the price is such that a lot of the low-grade logs, which are going across the wharf, are now being diverted to be used for a chip or pellets, and so that's a higher value for the producer of that, and that's not at the cost of food, because those trees were never in competition with food. And when they do go to China, they're just used for boxing and low-grade uses. and they get then when they are burnt as a fuel, they get the benefits of the climate change which we have just given them.
Okay. And what sort of volumes do you envisage sort of getting out of these waste products? Is it the sort of volumes that we require for run diesel fleets of today?
Well, one of these are one of the attractions of this is that, like anything, there's always economies of scale, but we can make these pretty small. And as I've said, I've seen a plumber in Christchurch who was making his own biodiesel just for his 2 utes, and he was doing it. He had a hot water cylinder. Why a hot water cylinder, I have no idea. But a hot water cylinder in his the back of his office, where all of his plumbing stuff was, and he just made it in the corner of his room, and he was using that for his own fuel. Now he had several fish and chip shops nearby, and he took the residues from them. So clearly, so what we would argument and say is this is circular economy. This is where we take the wastes that we would otherwise put to landfill or use for a less efficient way, like export to China, and get a higher value for what our products. And so that means that we are getting better value from our land use or our effort.
Okay. But it's not necessarily the value. It's I mean the volume. It's the value of what you can do. You can do your own.
Yep. I mean, the thing is that clearly, if you go to Z Energy, the facility they built in Wuri, which they've never used, is a rather large one. Now, the efficiency that they would have had on there would be far greater than what anything that we could do. But on the other hand, is when you're looking at a few years ago, the government did subsidise the production of biodiesel. And there was a couple of people in Auckland who were making it, and they were making quite a lot. But the issue for them was quality control, and that's because they didn't have the economies of scale to get quality. We are not. If you are looking at retail of this, where quality is important, then this is a different story. We are talking here production for own use. So the standard has to be the standard that you need for the integrity of continuing use of the engines, the boiler or whatever it's being used in. So you've got to make those calls yourself, but we know there is no problem on meeting whatever standard you want. Then you can do that. But our experience has been that the standard you make will be adequate. It's not something I would even be thinking about.
Does anybody else have a question?
Yes, I do.
Go for it, Alan.
Is there any truth in it that an engine running on biodiesel, its power output is down compared to mineral diesel?
Look, I'm not au fait at the moment. I'd have to check my information on that. It's not something I've dealt with for a while. But if it's a mineral diesel, a renewable diesel, then it should be exactly the same. If it is a biodiesel, then I could envisage that it may be a lot less. You just have to use more. We know that when you move from coal to a wood, then you have to use a lot more wood because the calorific value is definitely different. So, I could envisage that may be the case. Whereas, you need two buckets full instead of one.
And thank you for that, Brian. And the other question on what you know at the minute, the renewable diesel versus mineral diesel in price that you've mentioned. What do you know at the minute? Is it 3, 4, 5 times, or what have you heard whispers about?
I believe it's about 7% above, but I that's only these prices are changing so fast. My 7% was probably about a year's old, and the market will have changed considerably since then. And that's why, to me, for your application, biodiesel is a preferable than renewable diesel. With renewable diesel, you really are dependent on someone else producing it, and you're going to be paying their price. Whereas if you make your own biodiesel, then you're setting the price by how much effort you put in, how much you if you pay a price for the used cooking oil, if you pay too much, it'll be expensive. If you do pay a lot less, it will be fine. How you do it and the effort. But it's in your control. Whereas renewable diesel is not so much in your control, whereas biodiesel is, in my view, for this application we're talking about here, with a different situation, I might have a different thing, but we're talking here of basically, the self-use of the fuel. So you can contribute a lot easier. You can sort it out a lot more. I would be doing, so what I would be suggesting from this is that I would be looking at getting some work done amongst yourselves. I can give some names to people that you might contact who understand biodiesel production, and I would talk to the Kaitaia people, and I would talk to Fulton Hogan and Christchurch, and I would develop the specific answers to your questions. And then also find the recipe for making it, so you know exactly what we're talking about. And then you can also get the situation of its ability to be used in your engines. I could envisage where there may be some plant where it is not able to be used, but I don't know enough about the diesel engines that you've got to be able to answer that. But even if you do have some that it needs, but that's where you're going to need to have a project which is able to be able to use that. The type of work we're talking here is Ministry for Environment, the Waste Minimisation Fund, is an avenue where these type of projects are often supported because they like supporting community-based initiatives like this. I've got several projects underway, much bigger than this, underway at the moment. But what you're talking about, they can provide some funds, but you have to make sure that you present it from an emissions avoidance situation or a waste avoidance. So you're taking waste that would otherwise go to landfill or be in some other way be wasted and using that. So there is some funding around that could be done. I'm sure amongst your members that you will have someone there who has the technical capabilities to do what I'm talking about. And so I would be setting up a project, talking to all your clubs and finding those people, put a little project team together, and to be able to help. I'm happy to help, oversee, give any guidance, but the avenue is that, find out how to do it. I believe you're not wasting your time if you do this, whereas the renewable diesel, much harder, much more expensive, and it's not something that any one of you can do.
Thank you, Brian.
Any other questions?
Well, if there's a gap, I'm always willing to fill it. Brian, if you're using methanol to make biodiesel, then it's not fully renewable, is it? Do you know what the proportion is?
No, and that's the type of situation you can get with many things. Is that if you're a purist and you're going to be 100%, then essentially most things don't work. So there's always a a situation where you can never achieve 100%. Now, we've got the same thing at the moment. Government is saying on the one hand, we want 100% electricity, and the electricity sector saying, look, that would be way too high to do, because we need the thermals there for critical roles. And so even the sector is saying, no, don't do that. So you've got a situation here where if you take the purist, we can't do anything, then basically the only option there is to rip out the engines and put in electric. But what I'm suggesting is one that it keeps the integrity of the machinery that you've got, and you do not do that. You are just continue to use it and as it was designed for, but you're putting a different fuel into it. And from a heritage point of view, to me, that is a really important thing.
I popped my hand up a wee while just now. Just changing types of fuel for a moment. What are the alternative options for petrol-operated machinery? It might sound a little of a strange question, but I'm thinking particularly portable generators, that sort of thing, for when you're out working in the field. Any thoughts?
It's along the lines we've been talking, but it doesn't have the immediate easy solution that you have with diesels. But ethanol, you can buy ethanol in New Zealand. Anchor Ethanol make it in the Waikato. That has been available. Gull sell a blended their Force 10 in. I think they've still got 2 of their service stations somewhere who are providing Force 10 fuel, which has got ethanol. They were importing some from Brazil, but their main source they preferred was Anchor Ethanol, where it's made from whey. So I would be trying to work through how you can get access to that. Now, this is the advantage of a federation, is that you've got a bit more clout than each of the individual clubs. And so you've also got a good story, the type of story that also someone like Frontier would be more interested in supporting. It's got more substance doing it as a federation rather than as individuals. So it's yes, but I would be looking at getting the ethanol that Anchor is making that's domestic. I mean, you can buy it easily on the world stage. Gull were the main ones who were importing it.
Okay, thanks. I was aware of Gull with their blended petrol methanol mix, or ethanol mix, sorry, but I wasn't aware we actually were manufacturing ethanol in New Zealand, at least combustion ethanol.
Yeah,
Anchor
Ethanol have been doing that for many years. I think they're actually also getting to the stage where the feedstock has actually got some other higher values. So it's got to be able to, the question whether they keep going there. But the ethanol can be made. You could be making it on behalf of all your clubs, but you'll be using some of the herbaceous materials like maize stover or something like that, because most of the ethanol around the world is made from soybeans or those crops. And so you could do something, particularly in Canterbury, particularly if you had the thing that appeals to me is where you can use a waste. So if you've got cereal that is not suitable for food, then you could be having another alternative source of it. But I would be looking at finding someone who could build and operate that behind a number of people.
The problem with using Anchor Ethanol is it competes with the other use they use it for, which is making gin and vodka. And things like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
In New
It
Zealand,
wouldn't be the cheapest. Yeah.
in New Zealand, if you drink gin and vodka, it's made from milk, so it must be good for you.
But again, we see that, and this is the thing that I would encourage you, is that, and if I can go back to what Murray said before, and just use that as an example, Murray, is that any of our statements can be challenged and should be challenged, our knowledge, our thinking about these, because there are so many new ideas. We are in a world where, every day I'm excited by the number of people who are coming up with saying, yes, I can do this. We went through 30 years of neoliberal when none of that was encouraged. We've now got that, and that's what's coming through every day, and it really is exciting.
Ben, you've got a question for us.
Yeah, so I have in the background been doing some quick. I'm not an expert in biodiesels or anything like that, but I have been doing some quick. Just looking down academic articles. Everyone does bring up stuff like food insecurities in these academic articles. These they all do bring up that they still produce carbon emissions. They are water intensive. Like I can see on small scale applications, like for heritage stuff and sort of some things which can't be electrolyzed, okie dokie, but on mass scales, I can't see biodiesels taking off because it is problematic.
Most of those articles are written by an academic who doesn't have to do anything.
There's a variety of academics.
And so the issue is that when you approach it like we are, from using wastes and residues, we avoid many of their arguments in terms of their concern. And in Europe at the moment, there's a lot of those are taking sway. And the avenue is that, we have to think about, you in the situation you've got here, you can mothball all your engines and not use them for anything, or you can use them taking into account that, what you are doing is taking a material, a waste material, using it. It will still produce CO2, but the only way to not produce CO2 is to mothball your engine. And that is an option. But the avenue is that you can do these things, and I wouldn't be too swayed by some of those arguments.
What if demand grows too high? That obviously we can't. If demand grows too high, we can't keep using waste, so we have to start literally producing stuff just to turn to biodiesel. Like there's obviously a factor of like when waste, we can't. Waste doesn't meet demand. Yeah. It won't, like some heritage trains obviously won't do that, but if it would taking like the grand scale of everything in New Zealand, like if all the trucks did that and all that kind of thing, there will be a part where demand does pass for waste produced.
That's not actually true. Is that when Biodiesel New Zealand were making at Rolleston, they were making biodiesel. They were using rapeseed oil. They went out to the cereal growers, and the cereal growers found that growing an alternative crop like rape was better for their soil, better for their business, and all round it was a good decision. And they wanted that because in terms of soil management, you can improve your soils if you're doing crop rotation. And we all at school we learned about that rotational stuff, the farrowing of land and that. So when you look at this as an additional to something, we're doing some work at the moment on food waste. One of the aspects of food waste is keeping continuity of food waste. Now, this is food waste for making, through anaerobic digestion, making biogas. Now, the biogas, which also could be used in an engine, is how do you get that supplementary feedstock to have continuity? Because the bugs in the process need to be constantly fed, and they like to be healthy. And what the plant that's just been opened in Reparoa is in Central North Island soils which are selenium deficient. They've got a whole lot of problems in the soil. And so and they've been taken from being used for trees to now being used for cattle, is that having a monoculture of cattle with no other uses on that land is just going to deteriorate that land. But what we're looking at is sugar beet growing there as a crop. And when you've got the sugar beet, you've got fiber and other things that are left over, then you can use that and as the residue that can go into the anaerobic digestion to make the biogas. So we're not looking at growing sugar beet to make energy. We're looking at it to grow a crop for as part of the soil management, and the residues are able to be used, which helps the economics all right by turning that into a crop. So the aspect about the limits on availability, those don't stack up. Same for farm forestry. I look out one of my windows. I'm on in Taranaki, coastal Taranaki. The gullies here got steep slopes. And so one farmer has planted those up in woodlots, and so he's got a revenue stream where his cattle are. He doesn't have trees on there; he has them on the slopes. On the other side, which is a dairy farm, is that they've got the same slopes. They've got nothing on them. The cows won't go on those slopes, and they're eroding. So having a farm forestry approach where you're treating the land, managing the land properly, then and the animals properly, then you can get biomasses or residues as a product from those farms, which then can be used as a product to make your energy. So you don't plant them for the energy; you plant them for whatever use you need them, but you don't waste what's left over because you're able to process it into energy. So if you change the discussion round like that, then what you just said isn't necessarily true.
We've got time for one more question. Does anyone have one? Okie dokes. If not, we'll read I've got one that was sent in to me. Effectively, if we're going to import biofuels in the future, get them from Brazil or Asia or stuff like that, how can we make sure that we're actually reducing emissions? Because bringing them in from the other side of the world sort of probably negates a lot of the work we're trying to do.
Yeah, and I think that I have a lot of sympathy with that argument, particularly in Europe, where they take pallets from Canada right across to Europe and make electricity out of it. And I think we've got to be careful not to get into that situation. What we see at the moment is the import is to start the process, but it should not be the end point. But if we wait to and find some investors to build the plant and then operate it, we're probably looking at 10 to 15 years away. So do we do nothing for that time, or do we do a suboptimal solution, which is using the import? And we import our fuel already, so that's just very similar, but we're importing a fuel that actually does some more effort in terms of reducing our emissions, our net emissions overall. But the ideal should be that we're actually using our own resources to make that so that we can avoid that cost, that emissions cost of import.
That's awesome. Thank you very much for that. That wraps up tonight's talk, everyone. I'd really like to thank Brian, who's come and give us a really good kōrero. I think we've probably got a lot to think about, but it's really awesome that we've had this conversation in the first place. So yeah, thank you so much, Brian.
That's fine. It's been a pleasure. When you first contacted me, Dan, I was really interested in your questions. And I thought that here was a solution which was achievable, that could be sorted not too difficultly, and that it would have a really good outcome. One, it keeps your heritage engines going and I think that's important. But also it helps you to move to a decarbonisation approach and while keeping them away.
That's awesome. And as far as this recording goes, it will be, it's all being recorded. It will be available afterwards. And I have every confidence that if people have any questions, they'll be able to flick Brian an email. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we're doing every day. And this type of discussion is what currently I'm having. One of these type of discussions each day in different applications, different areas, because we've got people who are starting to look at this seriously, and some of them are taking them right through. As they find the right answer to the type of questions that you've raised today, because all of the questions you've raised are really valid questions that need to be addressed. I'm confident they can be addressed, and if we don't address them, then we're left in limbo land. So the avenue is that yes, we can do it, and it's not too difficult, and it's within the capability of us to do it. We don't need to have to get someone else to do it for us. We can do it.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for attending. I'll let you all enjoy your evenings now. Hopefully there's still a bit of sun out there for you. But yeah, looking forward to seeing everyone again if we can do one of these. Thank you again, Brian. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.